Good evening, YouTube Live. Glad to see you on my 23rd YouTube Live on this awesome Wednesday. This is a Wednesday. I want to get yes, this is a Wednesday, November 9th, the birthday of Ben Banneker. Sure, there goes that echo. All right. This birthday of Benjamin Banneker, who was the great almanac writer and cartographer who created the original boundaries with Pierre L'Enfant of Washington, D.C., the second nation's capital. I'm grateful to be here. So much I want to talk about, including a novel I'm reading. I'm halfway through. I highly recommend it. It's an awesome novel. It does what all novels should do. When I wrote my first book on Pauline Hopkins, who was a novelist born in New England, she talked about how novels are important because they teach to the younger generation the manners and customs of a time older than the younger generation. And that's exactly what this amazing novel, let me see if I can put it up here. That's exactly what this amazing novel, Augustown by Kei Miller, is doing. I am compelled. I haven't been compelled like I've been compelled by Kei Miller's novel. I highly recommend it. The way he writes in Jamaican patois is very realistic to me. And also what he's doing with history, because this topic he's talked about, the topic that the novel is set in, is dealing with Alexander Bedward, early 20th century preacher in Jamaica. And most of what I've heard about him, similar to Marcus Garvey, is that he was crazy for believing he could fly, right? That's the colonial myth, that he was a preacher, but he was crazy, mentally ill, because he thought he could fly. And what Kei Miller does is really explain to you the folk hero that he is, the folk hero that Alexander Bedward is. The Flying Preacher Man is the name of one of his sections. But I wanted to read one page from one of his sections. And here's my kid running up and down the park, getting her zoomies out of the way. So I just let her get her zoomies out of the way. But I wanted to just read one page that I thought was a profound page, because he is deconstructing the myth, which is the information about Bedward that is not true. But that's the information about Bedward that the younger generation is getting. The very colonial history, the very pro-imperialist, the very classist, racist, colorist history that the younger generation of Jamaicans get about Alexander Bedward. And what Kei Miller does is write this novel to tell us the customs and the manners and the people of this time. That in fact, he was not a crazy man. He was a powerful spiritual leader that made a positive impact on the nation and the history of Jamaica. So I just wanted to read this particular page. Kaya is the grandson of Ma Taffy. I'll begin with Ma Taffy Size. Ma Taffy Size is plenty years now that him dead. They bury him in the graveyard close by the church, the place I hear people call Duppy Lane these days. Kaya shivers a little and pulls himself closer to this woman he thinks of as his grandmother. Like everyone in Augustown, he knows the Bedward graveyard, and like everyone under the age of 10, he is afraid of that place. He wonders if it is a Duppy story his grandma is about to tell him. After all, men can't fly, but Duppies definitely can. The preacher man's name was Alexander Bedward, and it's him who did tell me one day that him was going to fly, Ma Taffy says to Kaya. Kaya's eyes flicker over a memory, but then they fall flat. He pouts his disappointment. I know the story already. Kaya, takes his thumb from his mouth and begins to sing a song he has learned at school. Guess what? Bedward jump and Bedward broke him neck. Bedward jump and Bedward broke him neck. Ma Taffy grips her cane and brings it down hard on the wooden deck of the veranda. You was there? She asks through grinned teeth. No, she asks through gritted teeth. Kaya stops and resumes his sulking. He is not used to this kind of tone from his grandma. Me asks if you was there, Ma Taffy insists. No, Kaya whispers. I never did. I never did dare, Kaya said. Well then, hush up your blasted mouth and don't try to tell me things that you don't even know or things that Babylon decide to tell you. And that's an excerpt of Augustown by Kei Miller. And I like the way Ma Taffy, she knew Bedouin personally, of course, and she's telling her grandson who's taught the wrong history related to what we get in school about our history, being very servile as Black people, and then it takes independent or family knowledge, family stories, like I've gotten from my aunties, and family stories like the ones that Kaya gets from his grandma, Ma Taffy, to know that what he was taught in school is not true. And so Augustine, his way, Kei Miller's way of correcting the false history about Bedouin. That whole excerpt that I read, and the whole, I like the way, I want to say before I leave Augustown, the way that Kei Miller characterizes a range of different characters, including Ma Taffy, her neighbor, Sister Gilzine, uh, Kaya, even Kaya's teacher's ex-wife. Um, Kei Miller gives a certain dignity to male characters, Jamaican men, that I've never read before, specifically in his description uh, of Kaya's, not Kaya, of Kaya's teacher's wife, Mr. St. Joseph's wife. And I forget her name now, but I am going to highly ask that those watching this really look at how how thoroughly he writes particular characters. And Mr. St. Joseph's is the name of the teacher, Mary. Yeah. The way he writes Mary, which is in chapter 6, Mary Bridgelong, wow, what a description of her. Um, he had one sentence where, yeah, page 58. This is Kei Miller's narrator describing Mary, who was the ex-wife of Kai's teacher. She understood too that the failure of her marriage was more her fault than his. That a man as stupid as he, uh, that a man as stupid as he was, couldn't really be blamed for the failure of the marriage. It was she who had made a fetish out of him. And I was like, wow, I've never read that kind of sentence in fiction before, and I look forward to finishing Kei Miller's novel, Augustown. What Kei Miller is doing with Augustown just reminded me of Paule Marshall's 1979 interview. What I have underlined here is from the book Conversations with Paule Marshall. If you're a serious novelist, any serious novelist who is serious about the goal of novel writing, read that book, Conversations with Paule Marshall. Um, in that book is an interview with um, Alexis De Veaux. Alexis De Veaux wrote the biography of Audre Lorde called Warrior Poet that I have. I highly recommend. When I was working at BAI Radio, it was one of the many books I got, but didn't get to um, interview her because I wanted to finish the book. I remember, am I going to be able to finish this? And I could have, but amazing work, amazing interview. I think one of Paule Marshall's best interviews was with Alexis De Veaux. Paule Marshall tells Alexis De Veaux, and she's talking about her character um, in The Chosen Place, The Timeless People, which is set in the Caribbean. But what Paule Marshall is doing in this part is talking about the character of the people of Bourne Hills, her fictional island. And Marshall says, as strange and as difficult as they are, as supposedly backwards as they have an astonishing sense of history. They know that until a people, an oppressed people, have actually wrested power from their oppressors, they cannot really come into their own. The Bourne Hills people refuse the many stopgap measures offered to them because, in their minds, the change necessary is a revolutionary change. And she's talking about, um, and this just reminded me so much of what Kei Miller is doing. Um, um, and so power means the right to tell the story. And so the colonial story of Bedward is that he's crazy. But Kei Miller is saying we need to, by writing this novel, using the artistic form of the novel, he's saying there's a much broader history of Bedward that needs to be known about a man who inspires people to live better lives. And so he lays that out in his novel Augustown. Look forward to finishing it. I'll definitely discuss the second half. All the election coverage, I'm seeing a lot of election coverage, and it's just interesting to me. By the way, if you just joined, welcome to my YouTube Live. Welcome to my YouTube Live. All right, I'm glad to see you here. Support my Cash App if you've learned something. My Cash App is $Roan Fraser. And please subscribe, like, and share. Don't forget to comment. Don't hesitate to comment. Comments are welcome. Comments are welcome. Subscribe, like, and share my YouTube. And don't forget to, if you've learned something and you want to help me out and you want to donate, donations are absolutely appreciated. My Cash App where you can donate is $Roan Fraser. I wanted to look at, with all the election coverage, I couldn't help but think of this incredible thinker whose biographer just passed 2 months ago. And I did a whole YouTube about the meaning of Jeffrey Perry's scholarship and why it's important for all of us to read what Jeffrey Perry wrote. With all the election coverage, and especially what I'm seeing on polling, um, the polling numbers are indicating the election results by not only party, of course, you want to see which candidate won, but it's doing it by race. And that was a red flag for me. It's showing you how white voters voted, how black voters voted. And when I really think about it, for me, I've always been a policy kind of person. Blindly, I've never blindly voted Republican. I have blindly voted Democrat. Now I'm more which party or which candidate based on the policy. I'm more of a third party kind of person because I know so much about the role of third parties in really bringing the necessary change to this country. I've studied the Liberty Party and how it was the unconditional abolition party that both before the Civil War, the Free Soil Party and the Whig Party needed to legitimize its democracy. You know, you need those third party systems, and just like the mainstream parties took from the Liberty Party before the Civil War, after the Civil War, the mainstream parties do this. I say all that to say I'm not a diehard Democrat. In fact, the older I've gotten, the more critical I've become of the Democratic Party. But the reporting of the results by race, showing the results, how people voted by race, is not helpful. It just reminds me of what Toni Morrison, the novelist, said. When you know the race of the person, whoever, when you know the race of someone, you know the least amount of information about them. You don't know anything if you know somebody. So I apply that to even the reporting, the very, banal, absolutely commercial reporting of the results. So I encourage, those watching my YouTube live, don't get caught up in the racial aspect of who's voting for what and how whatever election result that took place is absolutely a result of racism. It goes much deeper, particularly with how Jimmy Dore reported Stacey Abrams' election results, because Stacey Abrams had suggested, she didn't say it outright, that she was losing because Black men did not vote for her. No, that's not why she was losing. Zaid Jelani, I believe the journalist pointed out that she was losing because her opponent had opened a Hyundai factory, which made more jobs available. So that is exactly why she ultimately lost, not because Black men didn't. So you have to watch out for these tricks. Don't let race, color how you view the election results. See it as candidate versus candidate, but also be able to call out the Democratic Party when it's not doing enough, and too often that's the case. Um, this particular article spoke to me. It's an article that Harrison wrote for the New York Call, and it's about race prejudice and just about the strategic use of race prejudice by the people who run the media. And I thought it was so powerful. I'm getting the correct name of this article. Race prejudice dash dash Roman numeral 2 is the name of this. This is his December 4th New York Call article, and I think it's so powerful what he says. After reading this, this the way I felt. This really affected me emotionally reading this because it made me more aware. Even though he wrote this before working for Marcus Garvey, it's so powerful and so prescient and so relevant, and it makes me think and not allow myself, when I watch media on my smartphone or on the television, not to be tricked by race and think everything can be explained by race. Hubert Harrison writes, no, race prejudice is not innate, but it is diligently fostered by those who have something to gain by it. Let me explain. If white working people in the South can be made to hate Black working people, the result will be that the economic interests of the white side of the white workers will be advanced at the cost of the Black man's economic interests, Harrison writes. If there if side by side one body of workers protected to a certain extent by the courts, public opinion, and the ballot, and another not protected at all, whenever they are thrown into economic competition, the protected workers, Harrison writes, will take away the jobs of the other not body, the non-protected workers or the Black workers. That is what is happening in the South and elsewhere today. But the inevitable result of this is that there is created a body of workers whose standard of living has been permanently lowered. They are forced to live on a lower level, while as wage slaves was a term that George Jackson used, they are industrially efficient as the other group. Then now the protected group demands for itself a larger share of its products in the form of higher wages or better conditions of labor and of life. Its demands are met with the cold fact that the other wage slaves are doing as hard work or harder and doing it for less. And if they strike, the strike can always be broken by making use of that same body of workers whom the others have thus been breeding artificially as strike breakers. He's talking about Black people now and how white workers perceive Black workers. It is therefore to the interest of the capitalists of America to preserve the inferior economic status of the colored race, because they can always use it as a club for the other workers. Besides, the lower the lowest wage level, the lower the average wage. They are interested in keeping the average wage as low as possible. So they pit the workers, white against Black, to keep uh, yeah, white against Black to keep the lowest wage level as low as possible, Hubert Harrison writes. To this end, they must divide the workers, and they find race prejudice a very useful tool to do this with. So the newspapers owned by the capitalist class of the South, with their brother barons in the North, have entered upon a campaign of deprecation, vilification, calumny, and lies in an endeavor to use the ignorance and superstition of the workers against the workers. So they have had tremendous success, especially those larger northern papers like the New York Times that are controlled by Southern capitalists. And that is Hubert Harrison, whose photo you see here, edited by Jeffrey Perry. And it just reminds me when I see the coverage by race, whenever you see a station doing that, you want to say, okay, here she is. This is Miracle. Hi, Miracle. You want to say hi, or you want to get down? Okay. Well, you're running up and down. You wanted attention. Now you got it perfectly. She's a ball of energy right now. She has absolutely the zoomies. But I'm grateful for this analysis of Harrison, so that um, I'm not duped by the subtext or the narrative of what I'm supposed to think about the election results, that it was because white people don't like black people or black people are getting back at white people, um, which is kind of promoted by the way that the election results are told. So just be wary of that and don't fall for the okey doke. Let's not fall for the okey doke. Last segment here. By the way, before I start the last segment, I have to shout out my Cash App, Roan Fraser. If you can donate, it would be most appreciated. My Cash App is $Roan Fraser. And if this is the first time you're watching this, don't hesitate to subscribe, like, and share to my YouTube channel, which is my name, Roan Fraser. All right. Last awesome part that I wanted to talk about and to celebrate and to lift up. I saw an amazing play on Monday night. It is called Against His Will. It's an amazing story. What a powerful story. And an awesome talkback hosted by the writer, David Heron himself, and the amazing actor, Malik Yoba, who I saw on the Fox series, as well as his work in the documentary by Ruby Dee's grandson. Malik Yoba was in that documentary, and I'm seeing a theme, especially in the non-fictional area or the documentarian area. The artistic theme of Malik Yoba's work is about healthy Black relationships, and I really appreciate that work because he had some very positive, uplifting, constructive advice to the grandson of Ruby Dee, Muta Ali. Muta Ali is Ruby Dee's grandson, who produced an amazing film called Life's Essentials with Ruby Dee. And from that theme, he said he read page 31, Malik did, and said, this play has to get done. This is an amazing story of a Jamaican man, very talented computer engineer, and he's working for his boss, who's a woman, and his boss makes an advance. And his boss makes an advance towards him, and I want to get the name right. This was an amazing cast with an amazing story. The engineer's name is Daniel, and he was performed memorably by James Duke Walker. And his boss is Jillian Forbes, performed by Miranda Navajado. Amazing performance by this entire cast. I appreciated this powerful story. So in this story, Jillian makes an advance to Daniel, which Daniel declines, and Daniel chooses among huge deliberation. He's a very pensive character. He's an emotional man. He's a faithful man, but he feels bad that he slept with. But David sues Jillian for basically forcing him to have sex with her against his will. And this is a court case. It becomes a court case where this is a case examining male consent. Did Jillian, in fact, violate Daniel's consent by forcing him to have sex with her, even if he ejaculated? Did she break the law? Should she be prosecuted for sexual assault? Because that is what Daniel sues Jillian for, sexual assault. What a beautiful story. I haven't been to readings in a long time. I haven't been to readings of other playwrights in a long time. I directed and produced the reading of my fifth play, the original Mrs. Garvey. And shout out to Carlene Taylor, who performed the reporter in the ensemble. What an amazing performance, memorable. Each character in this reading was absolutely memorable. But I want to say one thing I appreciated about this reading is the two things in particular. The arc of David's story, the arc of particularly his lawyer character, the lawyer who defended Daniel, the lawyer who defended Daniel. And that lawyer was performed by Zainab Jah. The lawyer's name is Rachel. And I fondly remember Zainab in Danai Gurira's play, ruined. And her performance as, I think, wife number 3, she was the third wife of 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 the dictator. Wow, wow, what an amazing performance. Zainab grabbed me. So to see her years later in David Heron's play reading, wow. So she performs the role of Rachel. Rachel is Daniel's lawyer, and she is defending and explaining to the jury, to the judge, why Jillian is in fact guilty of sexually assaulting Daniel. It raises up all these questions about consent and how society generally will ridicule any man who claims he was sexually assaulted. And because of the way the audience was responding, I was having a deep emotional moment. I'm like, wait a minute, why is this audience laughing? Are they laughing at the fact that this guy's impotent? Are they laughing at the fact that this man does not have a right? The laughter kind of set me in a different way, and that's the whole point of a reading. That's the whole point. And this piece is layered. This piece is incredibly powerfully layered. So the two things I appreciated about it is the arc that Rachel goes through, because at first she thinks, you could tell she thinks she's going to lose the case, and she explains exactly why in so many different ways. But she has a moment of clarity. I'm not, without giving the whole story away. She really, she's the one that, wow, your heart tugs for, because the whole reason she's able to, and I was glad the way the play ended, she defended him properly. She defended him properly. The only way she was able to defend him properly is by respecting the relationship between Daniel and Heather, something that Jillian never did. And she really, once she started to respect that relationship, because she knew that Daniel's wife was a clothing designer, and when she saw what the clothing meant, she called the name of the clothing, and then you saw the dramatic, for me, climax of her understanding from a male perspective, really in that moment, why a man would want to punish a woman for seducing him, right? For having sex with him without his consent, having sex with him against his will. So thank you, David, for your amazing play. I highly recommend it. I will support its move to Broadway. Everybody talked about how great it would be to go to Broadway. I couldn't help but have in my mind the incredible playwright Leslie Lee, who taught me Broadway is not the goal. You know, he taught me about playwriting. He said straight up, the best production you'll get, Roan, and when you become a playwright, is not a Broadway production. He said, Leslie Lee told me, the best production will be the off Broadway, because you won't have the unreasonable demands from producers that Broadway producers usually demand, because they have their fixed idea about what the Great White Way story should look like, and it should never depart from the way. And so I trust Leslie Lee, and his work moved me more than any other, particularly his play based on Richard Wright in Chicago in the 30s called Sundown Names and Night Gone Things. That play changed my life. I'm a gay man, but it made every Black man trying to make it with the woman he wants to be with. He made it so realistic for all of us. Read that play when you get a chance. Sundown Names and Night Gone Things by my playwriting mentor, Leslie Lee. So check out Against His Will by David Heron. It was awesome to see the Consulate General of Jamaica there, along with Malik Yoba, along with some powerful audience members, including Camilla Forbes, who I'm so grateful shared her wisdom with me as a producer on Thoughts of a Colored Man. I just appreciated this play. I appreciate the arc that he told, and the response of the audience really highlighted. David asked an important question at the very end of the reading. He said, if the jury was all Jamaican men, because he kind of leaves open the question of how the jury decided. And that really, how would, I was thinking about my dad and all the male members of my family I know, and I had to realize that they would not find her guilty based on everything they taught me, all the men, but she should be found guilty. And David's message is clear. So thank you, David Heron, for an awesome, strong message that all people deserve to see and against his will. This is my 23rd YouTube. This is my 23rd YouTube live. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, and share.